From the center of the universe, now in its 7th season covering your 19-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast with Argos color analyst Ben Grant and Coach JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos post-game reaction podcast brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. My name is Ben Grant, joined as always by JB. Preseason game number 1 is in the books. The Argos drop a 24-16 decision to the Ticats. We will tell you all about the game, what we saw, what we liked from the potential starters, which players may be making a name for themselves and making themselves pretty hard cuts after game 1, and maybe who stood out from the crowd, guys that we weren't expecting. We'll get into all of that right after I tell you about Something in the Water Brewing, our title sponsor, who are back again with us this season. We couldn't be happier about it. They're in the perfect location, right in the heart of Liberty Village. They're steps from Lamport Stadium, where the Argos practice. They are just steps from BMO Field, where the Argos play their games. You got to get there. If you're attending a practice, you're going to a game, spend some time at Something in the Water Brewing. You won't regret it. They've got fantastic beer. It's a perfect setup, too. A beautiful sunny day out on their patio. So much selection, even into the non-alcoholic beers, and they've got some really interesting options to try. And, of course, if you want to go with the usuals, Longbow Pale Ale coming out soon, the beer that is made for fans of the Double Blue. You got to make sure you check that out. Something in the Water Brewing in Liberty Village. JB, first thoughts. Argos drop an 8-point game to the Ticats, but I thought it was actually a pretty good football game for preseason game number 1.
Yeah, it was. It was not sloppy. Really not until the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
I thought both teams, came out. Hamilton played starters, for a long time, which I think probably raised the level of the game. It was not an exciting game, but it certainly wasn't a terrible game.
Yeah, and they often are. Like preseason games, like from a fan perspective, if you're not evaluating talent, from a fan perspective, usually preseason games aren't great. This one was certainly on the better side of for entertainment value. I thought it was actually a pretty entertaining game. And like you said, I think starters probably from both teams played a little longer than expected, but Hamilton really pushed their guys. It's their home crowd. It's their only home preseason game, clearly. I think they wanted to put on a show. They seemed to really want Bo Levi Mitchell to get a touchdown pass. So he hung around for a long time. It was into that third quarter when they finally got a touchdown, and they were able to take him out at that point. But probably not, I would imagine, not the script they were looking for, because they had 4 quarterbacks on their roster. I'm sure they wanted to see all of them, but with Bo Levi Mitchell playing like 3 quarters or almost 3 full quarters, they got Powell in the 4th, and that was really all they had time for, a couple plays at the end. So do you give credit to Toronto's D for ruining their plan? How do you see that decision making in terms of Hamilton deciding to keep their starters in? Do you think that was the plan from the beginning, or they just wanted to get a touchdown and feel good about where they were?
Probably a little both. I do think it being the only home exhibition game, and they want to put on a good show for the fans. I think that's proper. I think that's the way you should do it. It's not free to come. So you should try and play your starters. And, they're not a team that has had a lot of success in the last couple of years. So I think as a coaching staff, you're like, we can't just say, okay, well, we know we're ready come the season. If you have a team that didn't make the playoffs, I would definitely play them a lot more in the regular season or in the exhibition than I would a team that won the championship.
And I didn't think it really prevented Toronto from substituting too much. Their offense also played longer than I thought they were, the starting O, but I would say the defense did rotate through. So by the time we got into the late second quarter, there were a lot of defensive subs being made. And so from that standpoint, I don't really feel like having Bo Levi Mitchell and the rest of the Hamilton starters out there really impacted on Toronto's game plan. But I think that speaks very highly to the level of effort and the level of play you got from the Argos second stringers, especially guys who are fighting for starting spots and fighting for roster spots. They didn't look out of place. It wasn't like when Toronto started sending in their seconds and thirds, they were getting blown off the field. Yes, the game did start to separate a little bit, but it wasn't like we've seen in some previous years where there's a mile of difference and a huge gap between guys that probably aren't going to be on the team anymore and guys that for sure are going to be starters. So I thought that was a real positive for the Argos defense.
I mean, I think if you're the Argos, you have to be happy with the fact that although you didn't necessarily have any breakout stars or maybe like a hidden gem, the twos and threes held their own, kept Hamilton in check. It was a bit of a rock fight out there. So I think that they would have to be very happy that you didn't have busts or huge gaps or sort of really glaring levels in quality drop off. I would imagine the coaching staff is pretty happy with this film.
I would think so. Yeah, I would be.
As happy as the coaching staff can be with film.
Yeah, there's still going to be moments of frustration. There was still some busts. There was still some poor decisions made, some bad angles. Like that happens. That's going to happen through the course of any football game. But for preseason game 1, we have seen some doozies, and this was not one of those. Before we get into some of what we saw from the different positional groups, to start, before the game even started, during pregame warm-up, there was an Argos injury, and we didn't get to see what happened. We saw on a television replay, it looked like Brian Cox Jr., a guy that's projected as a starting defensive end for the Argos, looked kind of like he got rolled up on. He's just in the very corner of a pregame shot, and so you don't really get a good look at it. Hopefully he's going to be okay, but he was helped off the field to the sideline and then into the locker room, and so hopefully we can get an updated status on that. That may even be out there by now, by the time you're listening to this, but he is a player you certainly don't want to lose. And not even, you can lose any player at any given time in a preseason game. It's such bad luck in a case like that to lose someone in pregame warmups where he just, he's in the wrong place at the wrong time and looked like it may have been an ankle that he got rolled up on or hopefully ankle, not knee, but I don't know. And so hoping that he's going to be okay and that they just kept him out for precautionary reasons or that it's something that maybe keeps him out for a week or so. But that was a really unfortunate way to start the game for him, a guy that was probably looking to put on a bit of a show with his new team. All right, JB, let's go through positional groups. So let's focus on the offense to start with 3 quarterbacks play. Nick Arbuckle got the start, followed by Cam Dukes. And then Horn came in, Tucker Horn came in at the end and actually got a lot of action in the second half, playing pretty much the whole second half. What do you think of the 3 quarterbacks and their play?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think that I would have loved to have seen a few more downfield shots taken. It was a pretty conservative game plan for all the quarterbacks, a lot of underneath, a lot of checkdowns. So it's hard to really evaluate. I think the short completions looked fine. I thought nobody stood out. I guess I mean I wouldn't say that anybody. I think they were who they were. Arbuckle was fine. Dukes is to quote Peters, not really my cup of tea, but he was fine. I think Horn, probably with the 2, 3s, and 4s, flashed a little bit, like as the number 4 quarterback. That's going to be a tough road for him, but he definitely had a couple of big time throws. He moved the team down the field for the final score of the game. So I guess I would give him the flowers if I were going to give anybody the flowers there.
And I think his was probably the least expected, I suppose, too, because we didn't really know what we were going to get out of Tucker Horn. We've seen him on film, we've seen him in the double blue game, seen him at practice, and it's hard to gauge. I thought he looked. I was hopeful for him coming into this game. I think he looked better than I thought he would, even still. So going through some of their numbers, Nick Arbuckle with that start, 10 of 14 for 121. Wasn't really pushing the ball downfield. He did have a couple of nice throws. He had a beautiful on-the-money throw on a deep dig route to Ungerer. Didn't really make any mistakes. He wasn't putting the ball in danger. And he kind of looked like the way you want your backup quarterback to look. I don't know if we got enough like you said, pushing the ball downfield to look the way you're hoping your starter looks, where there's a real threat and the defense feels like they're under pressure constantly. I didn't get that from Nick Arbuckle, but I got a safe, smart game from Arbuckle. So I'm fine with those numbers. 10 of 14 is great accuracy. 121, that's fine. Even yardage wise, like that's okay too. No touchdowns, no interceptions, and was perfectly fine. Cam Dukes came in second. Got off to a kind of a weird start. He threw a pick that was overturned because he took a low hit and seemed to take a heck of a hit, and that's basically how his day began. The interception was wiped out. The Argos were given some yardage there, but he didn't really ever get into a rhythm. He finished 1 of 6 for 22 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. I thought, I'm wondering here, with as well as Horn played, and I'll get to his numbers in a second. Do you think there's any way Horn and Dukes are fighting for that third spot? Like, I think we've always kind of just assumed, because Dukes has been a go-to guy. He's been the starter. Like when Chad Kelly wasn't in last year, it was Dukes, and I think it's easy to forget that because Arbuckle was the Grey Cup hero, but Dukes was the guy. Is there any way that his roster spot's in jeopardy based on tonight's performance?
That is a spicy question. I mean, they love him, as far as I can tell. The coaching staff they definitely, Coach Dinwiddie definitely, seems to love him some Duke. So I'd be surprised. Be very interesting to see how much run they give Horn in the second preseason game. Maybe they start Dukes, and I think if they start Dukes next week, that might suggest that they really want to see a competition between those two guys. I think if they start Arbuckle, then they have their locked in 1, 2, 3. But that would be for me. If Duke starts, I think his position might be up for grabs.
Dukes is a very popular name in my household. My daughter's favorite player is Cam Dukes, and so I know she'll be pulling for him next week for a better performance than what we saw today. But I think from a roster building standpoint, it's safer to keep Dukes. If Dukes goes, if Dukes ends up on the practice roster, he's going to be taken by another team. He's had too much CFL experience to not at least be someone else's third. And so I think probably, unless you're really moved by what Horn can do, I think it's probably safer to see if you can find a practice squad spot for Horn, and then you keep Arbuckle, Dukes, Kelly going forward. And also, remember, we don't even know when Chad Kelly's going to come back, and so it could be that these three guys are all on the dress roster come week 1 if Chad Kelly ends up going on the injured list, and we'll have to wait and see, because we're not going to be. I don't think the Argos are going to give anyone any hints on how that's going until we get to that first week, until practice reports have to start coming out. So maybe these three guys are there. Let's go through Horn's numbers. 16 of 21, 172. I had 1 touchdown, had both touchdown drives. They were both on Tucker Horn's watch. One in sort of the dying seconds, scoring a touchdown on the last play of the game. And one on, I think it was his first possession of the game coming into the third quarter, where he and Chop Williams, who we'll get into a little bit, really put a 1-2 punch together. But before we get into those running backs, Horn did throw the ball downfield. We saw him go deep a couple times. He had this beautiful 33-yarder down the sideline. I think that was Hooks that he found, and Hooks was pushed right up against the boundary. There was nowhere to put the ball, and somehow Horn found a way just to place that right into Hooks' hands. And then in desperation in those last few minutes when the Argos were driving, he did push the ball downfield again. So with that 172 yards, that's a good quarterback efficiency number from him. Yes, he's playing against Hamilton's threes, but he's playing with Toronto's threes. And so you kind of have to balance that out a little bit and go to the film and see what you can really make of his performance. But I thought he played very well, looked poised out there. There were times where when the pocket broke down and he started to scramble, where he did look like a rookie. He looked uncomfortable, where he kind of got low to the ground, almost not turtling, but like panicking. You see that with rookie quarterbacks, where when things start to break down, it's suddenly like they hunker down, they get low because they're just not sure where the traffic's going to be coming from. And he did that a few times and looked a bit out of place, I suppose. But it was only a few occasions. Made some really nice throws. Let's get into those running backs. What do you think of Chop Williams? 8 carries, 53 yards, a touchdown, 26-yard for his long run of the night. Was he the most impressive player on the Toronto Argonauts offense tonight? Close, if not.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't much of a passing wise. The plays were pretty conservative. Yeah, I thought he looked good. I thought, he's a load. I think he's really going to kind of nicely complement the 2 veteran stars they have. I thought he looked really good. I thought he was like a nice short yardage hammer with a bit of quickness to him. So yeah, I mean, it was a good showing by him. I think he has to be very happy.
Yeah, and it's not like McMahon played badly. So Deontay McMahon had the start. He had 4 carries for 22 yards. Great carries, long of 10. So it's not like they all came on one play like they did in the double blue game. And let's not forget, in the double blue game, Chop Williams had 2 carries for -1 yards. But that's the problem with the scrimmage, is that you don't get to see what running backs can do, especially physical running backs like Williams. But yeah, Deontay McMahon, I thought, played well. I thought he handled the start great.
How many running backs are they going to keep?
Well, that's the question, right? Because you've got so we haven't got to see Kadeem Carey, but we know what he is. We haven't had a chance to see Kevin Brown. We know what he is. And here you've got Williams and McMahon, 4 American running backs. That's a lot. That's a lot. I can't see even 3 American running backs is pushing it on some rosters now. Toronto doesn't like to field a ton of fullbacks, but usually most teams use fullback spot as a place to bank a couple of Canadians, a couple of national players. The Argos don't really do that. They don't carry a lot of fullbacks. Sometimes they don't carry any fullbacks. And here they've got Zorn listed as their fullback, their draft pick from this year, who really is somewhere in between that. I don't know. That's a really good question, and I think preseason game 2 may not even have the answers to that. I think you may have to go to Argos practice, and the coach is going through their positional drills and their practice film to really decide, how many of these guys can we actually keep, because you need your number 2, 3, and if you have a 4, if you've got these guys on your roster, they have to be special team studs. That's where I know Adeboboye was a national player, but you saw how impactful Adeboboye has been the last few seasons in Toronto as a special teamer. That's what your running backs have to be. If you're carrying extra linebackers and extra running backs, especially if they're American guys, they better be special teams aces. And I'm not sure that's what you're getting from really any of these guys. So it's going to be a very tough call for coaches come final cutdown day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what I'd have to really look to see what Williams is doing on specials. Because you're exactly right. Adeboboye was not just on specials, but was a special star.
Yeah.
And a Canadian. I think it's going to make it it's going to make it really tough to keep, because I think McMahon's on the team. Really, I think I would be shocked if he wasn't. So. That's going to be a tough call, but maybe they can get him on the practice squad. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I don't know. After tonight, where he just looks so hard to tackle. That's the thing with him. He's so low to the ground, standing about 5'8" or so, and he's got so much good weight to him that he had Hamilton defenders bouncing off him, and once he got ahead of steam, it was really tough to bring him down. Even on a couple plays they ran where you're just like, oh, this is going nowhere. When all was said and done, it was a 5-yard gain. So I think he's a player. I can't see Williams. I know it's just one game, but based on that one game, and also we got a ton of college tape on him. We saw what he was like at Ohio State. He's a player, and so I just can't see him not making the roster, and that calls into question a lot of things. Because again, Kadeem Carey, Brown, McMahon. I mean, it's interesting for us, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And a good problem to have. You'd rather be the other way. It's way worse to be like, who the heck's going to play running back? This is a good problem to have. But some other team is going to be very happy, I think.
I mean, they're stacked at O-line and they're stacked at receiver with Canadians. You know, so it's not an impossible scenario. It's just going to be a little different than a lot of teams do.
Yeah, but again, it's the special teams thing. Like, you need those guys to contribute, and you can have McMahon as a returner, but he doesn't play a lot of, like, he's not out there a ton on teams. And Williams should be able to play in that up back spot, but that's where special teams coordinator Mickey Donovan's going to have to make some calls. Like, they probably need to bring him into this conversation too and say, can you turn these guys into stars on specials, because we want to carry all these guys. I don't know. At some point, it ceases to make sense from a roster building standpoint. So we'll have to see. I think next week in Guelph, right back at it with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. This is your first call to make sure you get out there. Get out to Alumni Stadium in Guelph, 7 o'clock on a Friday night, the 30th. It is going to be a heck of an atmosphere. It always is. And you can go through the Argonauts website. You can go through the University of Guelph website to find tickets for that. But yeah, you want to catch that, because I think it's going to be a show between some of these running backs. Let's get into the receivers and what we saw from them. Nobody was really getting fed a ton. Like, the leader in catches was Herslow. In targets was Herslow, but he only had 3 receptions for 21 yards. Everyone after that, it's kind of the same. Everybody pretty much on the team had 3 catches for under 50 yards. Our touchdown getters, Herslow right at the end of the game, and that was it. And it was just a short, is that a quick out route or a hook route, from 2 yards out? But did anyone really stand out to you from a receiving standpoint? Like, I know, again, for the second time in a row, we saw Shane Hooks with a couple of big catches, one for 33 yards down the sideline that we already talked about from Horn. To me, no one else really stood out. I think it was a pretty tough day for DeMonte Coxie. He had a fumble. He got turned around on a play that should have been a first down, ended up losing yards on it as he got kind of spun around awkwardly. But aside from Coxie having a rough day, that's not a concern. You know what he's going to be. Anyone else stand out to you?
No, it was not a great day. Like, I didn't think, Grant didn't look, the kick return game didn't really have any juice to it. The downfield passing game didn't really have any juice to it. I thought, Anger looked fine. He ran some nice underneath stuff. And I think, there wasn't really, Mayala looks like a professional receiver, and I think he's definitely going to be in the mix. And he looks like a guy a quarterback's going to love throwing to, but nothing approaching, interesting.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, though. But I think we've seen enough from Mayala, and we know what Unger is. Brissett, I thought, actually showed really nicely today.
Yeah, he did. He flashed a little too. It was nice to see that, actually. That's a good point.
We didn't get to see anything from Mital. I don't know. He just wasn't really on the field. He was a starter on the depth chart, but we really didn't see him out there. I don't know if he got banged up, nicked up, or something like that, or if I think it has to be something like that. But I didn't notice it watching it live. So
Brissett was, as far as I can tell, Brissett was in to start.
In his spot. I'm not sure what happened with that. So we'll have to find that out. And again, maybe by the time you're listening to this, you already know the answer to some of these, and we're doing this directly post game. If you've got those, those seem pretty set to me. Like, I don't think there are a ton of questions. I think you're going to see DeVaris Daniels, you're going to see DeMonte Coxie on that one side. And I think the performances today, because none of the other American receivers stood out enough, I think it's to the team's advantage to go heavy Canadian. They can go 3 Canadians to the field there. And there you've got 4 guys that are fighting for time in Mayala, Ungerer, Brissett, and Mital. So we'll see how that works itself out. Maybe one of the most interesting groups to watch tonight was the offensive line. So the starters, as they lined them up to begin with, you had George Moore starting at left tackle, Sage Dockstader starting at left guard. Those two played really nicely together. If you heard us last week talking about the double blue scrimmage, we went on about how good they looked in tandem together. Nothing was getting through on that left side. We'll talk about their performance today. At center, you had Anthony Vandal, which is new. You had, Sirocco was there. Sirocco played some. We know Peter Nicastro, an all-star center. didn't get much play tonight. Dylan Giffen was the starter at the right guard spot, and then Ryan Hunter was starting at right tackle. From that starting group, JB, did anything stand out to you? Do you feel Vandal did enough to show he can be a starter at center, or at least an option at center? Did you think Dockstader and Moore were as impressive today as they looked in that double blue scrimmage? What were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I thought Vandal for sure at center seemed fine. There didn't seem to be any collapsing up the middle. From an offensive line point of view, there were no turnstiles, no obvious leaks. I think, like anything, there were good plays and bad plays. I think Moore got exposed a couple times with speed on the outside, and he got bull rushed a couple of times. I mean, I think Moore is going to be somebody that, he's fine. I don't think he's like a left tackle, turn off the lights and don't worry about it. I think that, it's going to be tough. Like left tackle is very hard to play. But he was fine tonight, which is, you'll take that. And of course, Hunter is, all world. Dockstader looked great, and they moved him out to right tackle in the second half. And so if he can give them that kind of swing flexibility, I thought he looked really good tonight. Yeah. So offensive line wise, I think they're in pretty good shape, but I wouldn't say it's locked and loaded, but I think they have to be pretty happy. But it'll be interesting to see how it holds up against a really ferocious pass rush.
Yeah, there was only one play I noticed where Moore seemed to get exposed a little bit. It was a late twist. Dockstader was out there at left guard, Moore was at left tackle, and they seemed to fail a little bit in communication and ended up with Moore getting beat around the edge, and there was also pressure in between the two of them. But aside from that, I think, even on plays where there were pressures, where quarterbacks were hurried a little bit, it wasn't like they're running free, like you said, where they just completely beat them clean off the line. That wasn't really happening to any of the Argos O-linemen out there, even getting into the second unit. And you were ending up with, what I love about that, and you touched on this, Dockstader being able to kick out to right tackle in that second half. The reason that's so big, as you said, this gives you some flexibility, because we know that Moore is the only American tackle we've seen so far who looks good enough that you can start him and you can feel comfortable about that position. Injuries during games, if you have an injury to Moore, if you know that you can now put Ryan Hunter at left tackle, as he was for a lot of last season, and then put Dockstader out to right tackle, if you feel confident in that, and I think tonight showed them that you could feel somewhat confident in that, it gives you a lot of flexibility. And Dockstader as potentially as a swing lineman, as a sixth lineman, is an option there. But I still think he's fighting for a starting spot, legitimately so. I think he looks like one of the best O-linemen in the middle of that offensive line. And it's going to be tough, though.
Play center. Now Nick Castro can become a swing guard for you.
Yeah, but that's...
I think it gives you a lot of... It just gives you some nice depth at O-line.
But you can't have... I just don't think you can have Nick Castro not starting. He's an all-star at his position. He's a terrific center. He's a terrific guard. So, I feel like he's got to be starting. Sirocco was an all-star. He missed all last season, but last time we saw him play was an all-star center. I don't know what you do with him. Then you got John Boss, and pronunciation is John Boss. I know we called him John Bosse last year, but got confirmation that he prefers John Boss as his pronunciation. He was playing left guard today. I got a lot of time at left guard when Dockstader went over to the right tackle spot. Boss looked good. You've got Moore that looks good.
He's pretty quick. I mean, they like him as the extra lineman on some of those plays, and he had some some plays where he lined up as a wing and then comes across for a kick out block. So they obviously like his agility. Yeah, he looked fine, and he played too. He took a role. He did not for an extra lineman. He held his own. There were no issues with him. I know he wasn't going against ones, but you're not going to have 8 starting linemen. I thought he looked perfectly fine against the twos.
Yeah, I thought so too. And that's the thing is, you're going to have to remember they only dress at most 7 offensive linemen. You've got those 5 guys that started today, plus you've got John Boss, you've got Darius Sirocco. You've got Peter Nicastro. And you, not to mention Anim Dankwa, who we haven't even talked about. We didn't really get to see him, but that's a draft pick that we were really excited about last year, and he's had some time in the NFL. That's a lot of guys. You can make a very good second. Like, check out this for like a second depth chart. Like, your second O-line could have Darius Sirocco at center, Peter Nicastro at right guard, John Boss at left guard, and then you're looking at one of the at Dankwa or Delance or Urgel, who played a lot tonight, at a tackle, and the other at the other spot. Like, that's a very good second unit O-line. And it gets to a point where you've almost got too much talent, where you have to start thinking about, like, is there a position of need somewhere else that we might be able to capitalize on. So we'll see how that goes. It's a positional group that gets banged up a lot, and so you want to be deep at this position at this time of year. Just look at what's happening to Saskatchewan. They've already had a couple guys go down to what look like pretty serious injuries. So yeah, you never know how that's going to shake out. JB, let's jump over to the defensive side of the ball. Let's start with the defensive line. I know we were without Brian Cox Jr. because of that pregame injury. That starting group, they had Derek Parrish, you had Christmas, Williams, and then Chatfield Jr. stepped up at the edge spot to start in place of Cox Jr. How do you think they handled themselves, that first unit?
Okay, it reminded me of the double blue game. I think that they're pretty. They seem pretty good against the run. They're not getting pushed around, but they do not have the first step to bring pass rush without it being a blitz. Like, unless you're bringing like 6-7 guys, they had to play, and they had to play a lot more games, like twists to try and get home. They even with twists, they weren't really able to get home. So I think that it's not a problem. I think that they all were fine. They weren't on skates. They weren't getting pushed around, but they definitely are missing that flow step. I mean, they are missing an elite pass rusher on that line right now, as far as I can see.
Yeah, and to give you an indication of that, no sacks tonight. Now, I don't think either team had a sack. I don't remember Toronto getting sacked at all either. But yeah, this Toronto sack exchange from last season, where you were accustomed to seeing 4, 5, 6, 7 sacks in a game, that is certainly different from what we've seen so far with this game and with the double blue scrimmage. There just hasn't been a lot of pressure on the quarterback. I'd say the guy that contributed the most pressure was probably Lanier, who came off the bench. Yeah. And he was in there, is that late second quarter into the third quarter? We saw him a lot, and he actually did get some hits on Bo Levi Mitchell, landed on him a couple of times, was in his face a couple other occasions. So that's a good sign from him, to see that burst from him that was maybe missing at the end of last season. Yeah.
Right. So, like, for sure, like, you look like he's a problem. Like, he's got pretty good feet and he's huge. So, like, he is definitely a problem. But yeah, I mean, you would love to add somebody who has an elite first step. They are missing that.
Yeah, and I think one of these guys, we're hoping that they step forward. I thought it might be Andre Carter, the guy that they signed off of Ottawa's neg list. They made that trade for Adebaboye. He was the guy that came in, and I'm still waiting on him. He's only been with the team now for a little while. I feel like it's just over a week now, and so maybe there's still some time, some acclimating. But he was a guy that I really felt could come in and get to the quarterback. And so we'll see how that progresses. It's still very early, obviously. There were some strange things I thought on the edge. First of all, they were moving Parrish around a lot, which I don't think I recall them doing last year. Like, he played on the inside, and they were not necessarily twisting with him, but sometimes lining him up on the inside and actually having him rush from there, trying to take advantage of a guy with a quick first step in the middle, maybe as a way to try and get some pressure. But there was also some, and I know you saw this too, what did you make of what looked to me like blown contain, and it seemed to especially happen with Celestin Haba, who seemed to be crashing down where it looked like he had contained responsibility, but that may not necessarily be the case. And if you're watching on your TV or you're watching here live in the stadium and you see contain getting broken again and again, you see Haba crashing down inside, sometimes the play design is such that the end does crash, and it's supposed to be the linebacker that actually scrapes over and takes over contain there. But I couldn't tell based on what I was seeing if that was the plan or if someone was making a mistake, and if Haba was the one making the mistake. How did you see that play, or 3 or 4 plays in this game?
No, it happened a couple of times. Again, it's hard to know. It like at first blush, it looks like like usually the end has contained. I guess I can make a kind of generic statement, but right off the snap of the ball was crashing down the line of scrimmage. So I just have to assume they didn't have contain, and that was somebody else's fault, because if they did have contain, then I would imagine there will be some coaching expletives, because that is definitely not how one sets an edge.
Yeah, but that's what makes me think, though. Like, it's not like he's new to the league. Haba's been around for a while. He's a good player. And so, to me, I'm thinking that there's another part of that where that's his assignment. And they were
rolling it, they weren't going starting linebackers. So maybe there was a disconnect there in terms of what they thought the linebacker was going to do. And that was, it certainly seemed like a couple of blown contains there. But defensive line was, to this point, they were who we thought they were.
And moving into the linebackers, like you said, we had got to see a lot of the second, third, fourth linebackers. They didn't keep with the ones and twos very long. Kassar got a pretty good run at middle linebacker. We saw Kwamu out there for a long time. And then Smith finally, who played, I think, the entire fourth quarter. And he was in there a little bit in the third as well. They got a ton of time. I don't know if anyone stood out enough for me to sort of see them as projecting as a starting positional player from any of those guys. I feel like, you're talking about McManus, you're talking about Judge, you're talking about Varga, and I think Dark Angelo, who did play at the beginning of the game, came up fairly early. Those are the guys that I see as positional starters or fighting for positional starting spot. I don't think I saw anything that changed that today. But I also saw some very solid linebacker play. And even, I thought Smith had a bit of a rough time for some of the plays that he was in for the third quarter, but he also made some fantastic plays, scraping along the line and firing through, blowing up guys in the backfield. So I think all in all, that linebacker position looks solid, but I don't think I saw anything today that's going to change my mind in terms of who I expect to see starting or even first guy off the bench.
Because I thought Kassar, we talked about, we thought Kassar really looked great on that one flash out to the sideline.
Oh yeah,
where
he coverage on the running back.
Yeah, to take care of the running back. Like, they definitely were trying to take advantage of that. They lined the running back up outside, and poor Kassar had to go line up outside with him out on the edge. But he did flash that. That was really nice. I mean, it was a great play. He went, sort of from the middle right to the sideline. Great tackle. So that was good to see. I think Smith, was he on that A-gap blitz where they scored the touchdown?
Yeah, and that's maybe let's just save that till we get into we kind of had like 3 busts / like scratching your heads. What happened? Let's save that to after. Maybe we'll get into. Maybe we'll get into
looked
that.
Nice too. He blitzed a couple times. I thought he looked nice. So it's great to see him. Seemingly feeling 100%.
Let's maybe let's talk about that. Maybe we'll talk about that play, and that will lead us into the DBs. So the play you're talking about, first of all, this was an absurd series of events. There were a couple of those in this game. The Argos were flagged for an offside on a play where they stuffed Hamilton on a third down. It was like a 3rd and 2. They stopped the running back for no gain. Flag came in offside. We looked at the replay for that. I could not see
nobody offside.
It just didn't look like anything. And then on the very next play, it's a 45-yard run. Hamilton scores a touchdown. That's basically game over. So, whatever. Let's leave the offside call. It's a preseason game. We can't get, too frustrated or upset with anything. But I would like to take another look at that. It just didn't, I couldn't see any angle where there was anyone even close to being offside. But that next play, it looked like Smith was assigned a blitz through the opposite A gap, through like the opposite side of the center, and it didn't look like anybody had responsibility for the A gap on his initial side, as well as the B gap to his initial side. There was just this giant hole with Hamilton's left guard have nobody to block at all, and of course they just ran through it for 45 yards or whatever that ended up.
That was definitely we like to call that gap integrity. There was on the I mean, they doubled him. They saw him coming a mile away. They basically had like 4 guys washing him out, and then the running back just ran through an 8-foot hole for a 45-yard touchdown. So, yeah, that was not one for Twitter.
No, and plays aren't drawn up that way. Like no defensive coordinator is saying, you know what, on this play, let's not have anyone look at A gap or B gap. Let's just leave those open. We're really going to pressure the opposite side, though. We're going to send a lot of heat through there. That's just not a thing. And so it means somebody messed up here. And we did see a few examples of miscommunication. That was probably the most obvious from the linebacking core and defensive line. Let's transition into the secondary, and maybe we'll start with a couple of busts and then get into some of the plays that did go well. To start with, the opening play of the game, first play, Bo Levi Mitchell airs it out down the sidelines to Lawler. Deontay Evans was in coverage. He got called for PI as a 45-yard penalty. Hamilton was only able to turn it into a field goal, but that play, it actually looked like Evans was in decent position. I think he just sort of panicked with the ball in the air, ended up with a pass interference penalty when you really didn't need it. And then I thought he settled down a little bit after that. He wasn't in for too much after that, but I'm not really worried about him as a positional player. It just seemed like
he was in phase.
Yeah.
He played it perfectly. He just got a little handsy at the end. I mean, pretty easy to clean up.
And then after that, we saw 2 other, I guess one bust, and then another play where it's just poor play. So the bust was on a drop touchdown. It was a pass. I think it was still on that same first drive, and Tim White was wide open in the back of the end zone. The ball was just a little bit overthrown. White got his hands on it, couldn't quite bring it in. And on that play, it looked like Quincy Mauger thought he had safety help over top, but Tyshawn Blackburn wasn't over top. He was on the opposite side of the field. And so Mauger just let White run right by him. And he seemed to be signaling to someone like, hey, you got this guy, but there's no one back there to signal to. So again, that's stuff that you do expect in preseason. But between guys that, Mauger is an experienced player, Blackburn, you're hoping, is in line for a starting spot there at the safety position. You'd like to see fewer breakdowns like that. And so that, I'm sure, immediately is going to get looked at, and they can try and figure out who went wrong and where the bust was. But that was clearly a bust in coverage.
I think it speaks to just, in my opinion, just how difficult zone is in the red zone. Because, zone defense where you're covering an area instead of an individual, zone is kind of a misnomer because zone becomes man. You don't just stay in a zone forever. And in the red zone, the plays happen so bang, bang. You have to make such a quick decision as to, do I stay in my zone or do I cover this man? It's just really hard to play zone down there. I see why they want to, because it's also really hard to play man in the red zone.
Especially in the CFL with that 20-yard end zone.
But zone is, you see it. Zone is tough. Guy was 14 yards open. So I'd rather them catch a touchdown with a guy in the shot.
Yeah. And in that case, Mauger's playing a spot where he believes he's waiting for, because he was on the trip side and he's waiting for a receiver to cut in front of him underneath that clear out. And he thinks he's got help over top. So he's leaving that, looking for the route coming in underneath. And, but meanwhile, nobody picked up White over top. The other play was Darius Bratton playing halfback, and this was a problem play because Bratton was playing the sticks. It was 2nd and 10. And you do, as a DB, you need to be aware of down and distance. You know where that first down marker is. And typically, OCs are trying to run plays to just get to the sticks. And so you see DBs like planting their heels at that marker. But you can't, it's not in stone. It can't be an absolute. And on that play, Tim White just flew by Bratton. He had his feet planted 10 yards deep and was nowhere close as Tim White ran by him. I believe that ball was overthrown and ended up being a 3rd down and a kicking situation for the Tiger Cats. But to me, that's a play you can't have. And so Bratton, with the experience he's had as a starter in Edmonton, you'd like to see better from him, and hopefully that's just a one-off and not going to become a theme for him, because you'd like to be able to count on him for one of the starting halfback spots. Elsewhere in the secondary, in terms of the coverage, I thought there was some really good coverage. Nobody that stood out as completely locking down their guys, but I didn't feel like anybody that was out there was completely getting taken advantage of. I suppose late in the game, you had your draft pick, Asibo Dadze was down there, and he drew a penalty. He was actually, I think he drew 2 penalties, and he was getting picked on a little bit on the outside. But I thought positionally he actually held up fairly well, aside from getting maybe a bit handsy. Nunn Liddell, same thing on the other side, where late in the game they did seem to be going after those 2 guys. But I thought the secondary held up well. There weren't any real concerns there, but also nothing that's going to change my mind as to who the starters are. If I had to say today, amongst this group, which didn't include Benji Franklin, which doesn't include Mark Milton, I think you'd be comfortable enough going with Evans and McFadden at the corners, with Bratton and George Jr. at the halfback spots, and Blackburn at safety, knowing that you've still got Benji Franklin, Mark Milton, and a few of these other guys that have been making plays. So I'm not really concerned about where the secondary is at right now. Oh, and Jonathan Edouard, I forgot to mention him too. So another guy that's that wasn't out here today. JB, any as we start to wrap things up, any final thoughts? I'm just kind of going through my list of notes here on plays to talk about, checking a few boxes.
I guess I wish we didn't play Hamilton again next weekend. I've sort of seen all I need to see from the Hamilton Ticats, but I guess we're gonna play it back one more time.
One more note that I just hadn't got to is just my frustration at Toronto late in the game, down, I can't remember what they were down at that point, but deciding to punt on 3rd and inches. I think it was 8 minutes left, 3rd and inches, near midfield. But I think, and again, if you're watching this at home and you're like, why are they punting? It's because the purpose of these games, the primary purpose is not to win. The primary purpose is to evaluate your talent. And I think probably at that stage, you probably have Mickey Donovan saying, like, I need to see these. I want to see the gunners. I want to see coverage teams. I want to see protection. And so probably at that stage, they felt a punt was more valuable to them as a team. I don't think in a regular season game that would be what they do there. I know we've sometimes questioned some 3rd and short decisions over the years, but to me, that was one where you do go for it. But if instead your priority is evaluating talent, then that's probably why you saw some of the calls that you saw in this game the way that you did.
And then they did go for it and didn't get it.
I know. They did go for it, and we're like a full yard short when they did go for it.
That's an area to look at for next Friday.
Well, it's not a new area. We've talked about 3rd and short as a problem for several years now, and I'm hoping this is not another season of frustration in that area, because we've been waiting for Toronto to come up with a 270-pound quarterback. Or some sort of solution, because again, like you saw Milanovic Litre on the other side of the ball, like Hamilton's fullback, come in and take those short yardage snaps and be successful time and time again. You see Tommy Stevens with all that weight in Calgary, and obviously they have it down with Streveler in Winnipeg. You would like to be able to count on that 3rd and 1 yard as an automatic, and they haven't ever really been in that position in the Coach Dinwiddie era, and so it just always seems like it's a fight to get that yard. And I still think at this moment, Chad Kelly is the best at achieving that, but you don't want your star quarterback in there taking all those hits on third short. This is a conversation for another day, JB, but because we've rehashed this multiple times.
Well,
so.
And speaking of his, look, I thought full credit to Hamilton. I thought Hamilton laid some lumber tonight.
Yeah.
I mean, there were at least 5, take your breath away hits. I mean, we had. I thought that Bratton had a really nice hit to kind of make up for the earlier kind of mix up. But you look, Hamilton laid some wood tonight. So looking forward to next week. I'd love to see the Argos kind of bring a little more defensively, maybe give back as good as they're taking, because the offense took some licks tonight.
Yeah, for sure. Friday night in Guelph, Alumni Stadium. Make sure you get your tickets. We hope to see you there. Mike Hogan and I will be there on the radio call. You can catch that. But really, you should be there. You should be there in person and check out this game. But listen to us while you were there. Maybe that's the happy compromise. 7 o'clock, Alumni Stadium in Guelph against these same Hamilton Tiger Cats. That will just about do it for us on this post-game reaction episode of the X's and Argos podcast from Hamilton Stadium. 24-16 Ticats over the Argos. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.